grateful to see the turnout here this morning. All of you who have come, and particularly the wonderful sign of unity that so many of my brother priests have come. And I've heard from others. I heard from Bishop Doran, who regrets that he was not able to. Bishop Doherty had hoped to be able to come back, but with Holy Week and the schedule, he just wasn't able to do it. But so many who wanted to be here as well. And I know my brother priests, in some ways, we're beginning to feel that we're meeting too often under these circumstances. We've had various funerals of priests in recent months, and every one of them brings forth so many of those thoughts, so many of those very natural reactions for all of us. I would like to begin by expressing in my name, and certainly on behalf of the brother priests, our condolences to Father Tom's family. It's an extensive family, a large number of brothers and sisters from various areas had a chance to join before Mass. Our condolences. It's always hard to lose one of our own. And knowing now that he joins not only your parents, but a brother and a sister who have already preceded out of this large family. It's not just our condolences to you, but it is also a word of thanks that we always owe to the family for a good priest like this. Father Tom had his life experiences. Father Tom went through the seminary and all of the formation and all of that sort of thing. But the fact is that Father Tom also came from another formation, which was the family itself. He is, if we want to put it that way, a chip off the block, an acorn from the tree. And you are part of what was the formation that made Father Tom to be what he was, beloved as he was. And it was here in the parish church. My condolences and that of the priests as well to all of the faithful of St. John the Baptist, but others of you who may be here from some of the other places where Father Tom served. 6 times a pastor, if I read his list correctly, working also at the high schools at Ackland, at Marion, and at Boylan. All of this means that Father Tom left, we might say, in his wake, people whom he had served, people whom he had blessed with his presence and with his priesthood. And particularly for those of you who are the faithful here in Sumner, who've had Father Tom for the last 6 years, this opportunity this morning for this final funeral Mass, this final prayer for your pastor, for your shepherd, and I gather from your friend. There are so many who have benefited from the ministry of Father Brantman. I was here not so long ago to do the confirmation. And in that hour and a half, 2 hours, Father, you had the one impression, everything was done right, everything was done calmly. But the one great impression that I really took away was this was a man who didn't take himself too seriously. He took his responsibilities seriously. He took his priesthood seriously. But the humility and the comfort of how he lived and comported himself came across immediately. And what an example that is for all of us, as in whatever way we have been called and blessed, we seek to live the faith of Jesus Christ. So it's a day of sadness. The sadness began when Father was found, when any of us got the call or the news. I'd spoken to Father several days before he passed away. And he said that he was going to have another visit with the doctor, but things were not looking good. And the thing that impressed me from the phone call was he wasn't looking forward to it. But Father was ready to go through his final sufferings, as the Lord would call them. In some ways, it's rather hard for us, as sad as we are today, to feel too sadly for Father Tom. Here was a good priest facing, at least as he described it to me, the potential for several months of difficulty before the end would be clear. And yet, Christ took him. God called him home. God spared him what seemed to be in front of him, his own imitation of the passion of Christ. And he took him in Holy Week, or took him just before Holy Week, that Father Tom could perhaps be celebrating elsewhere. It is here, in the joy that surpasses the joy that we can imagine. It's good for us to be together at a moment like this, even in our sadness, whether it be the family, brother priests, the faithful who have known him. And yet, our task here is to fulfill a task which is not just emotional. It is good for us to comfort each other. It is good for us to support each other. But there is something deeper that we are doing here this morning. It is an act of our Christian duty, and one that Father Tom would have taught us and would have recognized well. And our first duty this morning is that we should give thanks. That we should give thanks for the good that we have been shown, that we have known, that we have learned, that we have been cajoled and instructed to in the preaching and the living of the priesthood of Father Brantman. To have a priest in our midst, to have a priest in our parish, the number of times, perhaps just a casual conversation after Mass, maybe that conversation in the confessional, when Father, even perhaps unknowingly by the movement of grace, said something that I needed to hear. Father meeting in the office to give instruction, consolation. Father doing the other funerals. And in 6 years, and those other years, and other places he's done. How much is the good that has been given to us through him by Christ? It is a morning for us then to thank God. To thank God for the gift of faith, the gift of our Catholic faith, the gift of the sacraments that came through the hands of the priesthood of Father Brantman. But if we pray in thanksgiving, the other part of our Christian and Catholic duty this morning is to pray specifically for Father Tom. It is our task to remember to continue to pray for the repose of the souls of all of those who have gone before us. And not just on this morning, not just at the funeral Mass. We must remind ourselves to continue to pray for all of those who have gone before us. Our friends, our parents, our brothers and sisters, all of those. The priests who have served us at whatever point in life and have gone before us. It is our task to pray for them. In one sense, to repay them for the prayers that were offered for us during their lifetime. But it is also for us to pray for those who are unknown but have gone before us, for all of them, praying that God in that final moment remove any remaining sins, any remaining flaws, any remaining deficiencies, bringing them to himself in the fullness of grace, in the fullness of joy. We just heard that gospel of Lazarus. Lazarus brought forth from the tomb. And a couple of things might be helpful for us this morning. First, the comment of the Jews, seeing the reaction of Jesus before the death of his friend. See how he loved him. If Christ would pray and cry before the tomb of a friend 2,000 years ago, it is our faith that he understands the friendship that all of us have with Christ in our baptism now. See how he loved Father Tom. See how he loved those who have gone before. But the second thing is to say, with Lazarus coming forth from the tomb, it is not enough, and Christ knew it. Christ was building towards his own resurrection, towards that glorification, by signs and by hints in advance. Lazarus coming forth was only the reanimation, we might say, of the same body that you and I bear now. Our prayer this morning is that Christ make good on his promise, that what will be given to Father Tom, to you and to me, if we are faithful, is not just to come back to what we are. Nice enough, I suppose, but in its own way tragic, because we would die again, like Lazarus. But see how he loved him. He promised him the eternal joy, life eternal, the transfiguration, with the end of all pain and suffering, the end of all temptation and sin, to be made fully like Christ. It is hard this morning, in one sense, for us to feel too sad for Father Tom. Being called home, having avoided the certain suffering that perhaps laid in front, with the knowledge and faith of what lays in front of us, when we meet Christ, if we are faithful, we can give thanks today. We can pray for him, but we can also rejoice for him. This is an opportunity for all of us to share our sorrow, to share our grief, to share again with all of the family, with all of the parishioners, our condolences. But we cannot overlook, in faith, it is also an opportunity for us to share with each other in joy.